Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the December 17th, 2013 business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. We have a quorum of members present. I'd like to call the meeting to order. To begin the meeting, I'd like to introduce Joel Eichelberger. Joel is a third grade student at Pangbourne Elementary. He will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Joel?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Joel? Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you like to do in school? Do you have any? Why don't you first introduce any guests you have with you here today? Who's here with you?
My grandmother and grandfather are here.
All right.
My sister, mom, and dad are here too.
Great. Is there anybody here from your school?
And my principal, Mr. Meredith, is here. And my teacher, Miss Brown, is here.
You like Miss Brown?
Mm-hmm.
You better say yes.
Good answer.
So what do you like to do when you're not in school? What do you want to be when you grow up?
When it's a good season, I like to play baseball.
Good season.
That's great. And what's your favorite subject in school?
Math and science.
You're the man.
You set
Well,
us up all the time.
I do not. Did I ask you that question before? Well, thank you, Joel, and thank you to the Eichelberger family, as well as all your teacher and your principal from Pangbourne for selecting Joel to come. We appreciate your starting the meeting. Good luck for the rest of the school year.
Thank you. Okay, so Joel, you can take your parents home now if you want. All right.
Are there any other students or guests that any board members would like to introduce?
I would like to introduce our new student member of the board, intern or SMintern, Coleman McHose. He was elected at our last meeting.
What's the acronym again?
SMintern.
SMintern. Okay. Is that in your bylaws now? Or?
I think it is, actually.
All right. Excellent. Well, welcome, Coleman. We look forward to having you here for our meetings this year when you're able to make it, and look forward to having you in the chair come July. Any other members want to introduce guests? Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda.
We might recognize the fact that a former board member, student board member, is in the audience, Amanda Crable. Amanda, welcome back from college. It's good to have you here. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to seek approval of the agenda as presented by the Agenda Planning Committee.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second? Second. Was that Mr. Ridenhour? Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour.
He's not used to seeing that.
I'm not. It's got me all thrown off. Are there any amendments or any discussion regarding the agenda? If not, all those in favor of approval? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student board member concurs. Approval of the minutes?
Mr. President, I would like to move for the adoption of minutes from several different meetings. A work session held on Tuesday, December the 3rd, a closed session held on the same date, and then minutes from our regular business meeting on December 3rd. 3 sets of minutes. I would move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Fisher seconds the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections, amendments, or discussion on the minutes? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. So next on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Wilcox?
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, we're privileged to recognize some championship athletes. We want to begin this evening's recognition by asking the members of South High's Unified Tennis Team, who won the 2013 Unified Tennis State Competition, to come forward. Richard Wright, our Public Information Officer, will read the names. I'm going to hand a plaque. We would hope the board members would join me up to shake hands with these fine student athletes. And Mr. Bailey, if you would please honor us with hanging the Medal of Achievement across the necks of each of the young people, we would appreciate it. Board members, please join me.
I just want to note that this team is about 30 people strong, but about half of them were able to make it this evening. We know the evenings are tough, but we're happy to honor the students from South High this evening. I'll call your name if you could come forward. Johnny's Boyce. Richie Dobson. Alexis Griffin. Cortland Hahn. William Hildebrand. Kendra Jeffries. Musa Akita. Jesse Shirley. Joe Shute. Robin Shute. Jeremy Spikes. Good job. And Coach Barbara Cosner. Please join me in congratulating Coach Cosner and the South High Unified Tennis Team.
We'll let the Unified Tennis Team stay right here with us. We're going to recognize one additional student athlete. And this evening we're going to recognize Megan Grams. Megan, are you right here in the room? Would you come forward, Megan? Megan has won 7 out of 10 invitational and championship meets throughout the year. In fact, she lost to only one Maryland athlete throughout her regular season. At the Frank Kieser Invitational, she broke the Boonesboro High School 3-mile cross-country record by 59 seconds with a season best time of 17:36. Is that correct? Following the competition this season, she competed in the Nike Regional Cross Country Championships in Creighton, North Carolina. She is now a qualifier for the Nike National Cross Country Championships, and she finished 10th overall with a time of 18:07 for 3.1 miles, which was also a season best. Megan is also part of a cross country team that has a combined 3.8 GPA, and she is one of the brightest students on the team. We're proud of your accomplishments, and thank you very much for winning a state championship. Congratulations, well done. what I probably should have led with is that Megan is the Boonesboro High School 2A girls cross country champion. Thank you, athletes. You're welcome to go. As these fine athletes and their families make leave, we will introduce the next item on our agenda. This is a special moment in the history of HCC. The Hagerstown Community College president, Dr. Guy Altieri, is here. He's going to present something to the board members and perhaps walk you through a little bit of history. Dr. Altieri?
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's a special pleasure to see all these fine athletes tonight. You are a great farm system for HCC. In my 13 years at the college, HCC has won the Community College President's Cup, 11 of those 13 years for the combined win-loss, the best combined win-loss record in the state. So keep sending us all of those fine students for athletic and academic challenges. I'm very, very pleased to join you this evening. I know the Washington County School Board has made many smart decisions over its history, but there was a special decision that the school board made back in 1946 that I especially think was absolutely wonderful, and that was the authorization to move ahead with post-secondary education in our county. A birthday, September 18th, 1946. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, college students made their way to Hagerstown High School. They had their classes from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the evening. They spent 10 years at that high school earning college credits and graduating with associate degrees. As part of that wonderful history, 2 of your past superintendents played a spectacular role in giving birth, quite frankly, to Hagerstown Community College. Superintendent Ben Willis. Many people in our county don't remember that name, but he was an extraordinary visionary, and he was really the one that got things started. That history is so important that I commissioned a study group a couple of years ago to put the history of what I like to call the community's college together. And all of you have in front of you a wonderful history that in great detail really takes a look at what was happening in the country from 1946 to 2012, what was happening in Maryland, what was happening in our county. The author, Dr. Diane Weaver, had been an employee at the college for 20 years. She also worked for the Maryland State Department of Education for 10 years. She taught at the college. She was an administrator at the college. Her PhD is from the University of Maryland with a specialty in Maryland history. There could not have been a better person to work on this project. She spent the better part of 2 years working on this project. It is an extraordinary scholarship that was worked through with painstaking research. There are well over 1,000 footnotes in this document, and Dr. Weaver made a promise to me she wouldn't put anything in here that she didn't have 2 viable references for. So as you make your way through the chapters, you'll see very, very extensive footnoting. The names you will read about are names that you've heard about over the years. This is an extraordinary success story for our county. Most of the community colleges in the country, and today there are well over 1,200 of them, were founded in the 1960s and 1970s. I wish I could precisely document where we are on that birth order, but I think it's clear we were among the first 50 or 100 community colleges in the country. The first community college was founded in 1909 in Illinois, and a few community colleges surfaced in the 1920s and 1930s. We are very proud of the fact that in 1946, we became the first community college in Maryland. Those folks in Montgomery County profess to have been the first as well, but I can assure you, Dr. Kepler, with multiple conversations he's had with me before his death, documented in great detail why Washington County was the first. Interestingly enough, in 1946, on September 18th, Montgomery College started that same exact day. Dr. Kepler pointed out our first class was at 8 o'clock. Their first class was at 9 o'clock. We both graduated our first associate degree graduates the same month. We graduated our students a week before they graduated their students. So we have a whole list of things that clearly indicate we were first in the state. An extraordinary decision that was made in our county. Very much a split decision. The school board was under tremendous pressure in regard to those who were advocating for post-secondary education being started in our county in 1946. And as the history documents, it was the returning veterans from World War II who really presented a very aggressive case for why they needed local post-secondary education. At the time, Frostburg was a normal school, essentially focused on teacher education, and many of those returning veterans were interested in industrial technology, engineering, many applied fields of what we call STEM today because of their experiences in the military. That first class that attended Hagerstown High School, there were 95 of them, and the vast majority of them were World War II veterans. The first graduating class in 1946 actually had about 34 graduates. Only 2 women as part of that group. Both were veterans, and of that group, only 2 were not veterans. So it really was an extraordinary start to the college. For the first 25 years, the school board really oversaw the operation of the college. And back in those days, if you think you're busy today, the school board actually had 2 meetings. Your first meeting was to talk about K-12 business, and then you would break for 20 minutes, and then you would talk about post-secondary education, and you would talk about the junior college activity that was taking place at that time. I think you all know things started at Hagerstown High School, and the college was there for about 10 years, 46 to 56. Then it moved to South High, and it was there for about 10 years. And then it moved to its own campus in 1966, the campus that the college operation continues to grow from today. Ben Willis really did a tremendous amount of research and brought some specialists in from all over the country. And interestingly enough, the veterans were pushing for the college, and Atlee Kepler is quoted in the book as saying the part of our community that was not in support of the college was the business community. And Atlee quotes a number of business leaders as saying, if we give people too much education, we're going to have to pay them too much, and we're not going to be very productive as a manufacturing community. Boy, has the world changed. in regard to the attitudes of the business community on the importance of education and how valuable an extremely well-educated workforce is. I did want to point out a few things in the book, if you have it in front of you. I alluded to earlier the fact that the book really covers 7 decades. And if you look at page Roman numeral 10, right in the beginning, on pages 10 and 11, you can see the titles of the chapters, where the first chapter is the 1940s, second chapter 1950s, and so forth. And we put phrases for each of those decades in regard to what was happening at the college during those periods of time. And it's really extraordinary. One of my favorite chapters is the chapter on the 1960s, when the civil rights movement was at its peak, when George Wallace visited downtown Hagerstown, and one of our longer tenured trustees, Carolyn Brooks, was a young girl growing up in Hagerstown and snuck out of her house to see this man who she had read about making a speech in the square. All of that is integrated into how discussions on the college campus, via the student newspaper, via faculty panel presentations, helped our community address questions we had and decisions we had to make in our community about the civil rights movement. As you go through additional chapters, there's mention of what was happening in the country, what was happening in Maryland, and local decisions. Hundreds and hundreds of local names are mentioned in the history, past county commissioners, past school board members. In fact, John Baer, I think, as you look at the history, his role in chairing the school board in the 1960s and dealing with the whole issue of North High and South High and how the school board was going to move forward. Fascinating reading. I think all of you are going to enjoy the time you spend looking through this. We have special features throughout, individuals who played a very key role. Leon Brombeck, many of you know, spent many, many years as a counselor with Washington County Public Schools. He was the first minority to attend Hagerstown Junior College. There's a special feature in here where he tells his story about being the first minority on our campus. There's a feature in here regarding Atlee Kepler. And I think you all know Atlee was the college's first president. But before that, he was a longstanding employee of the school board. Really didn't come on the scene until 6 years into the founding of the college. And of course, William Brish played a very key role, because Ben Willis, after a couple of years in helping start the college, really passed over the leadership to Superintendent Brish. I think you'll also find fascinating the pictures that we were able to secure from various archives, which are in the back of the publication, around page 330. Many of you will recognize these structures and these individuals who were outstanding citizens in our community and played very key roles in the college's success. It was very, very important for us at Hagerstown Community College to put this history together. We think it's extremely important that people in our community know about the history of our community, and this, I think, is a significant contribution to the educational history of our community. So I come today to both give you the book, and I believe we gave you one of the author's signed copies, one of the select editions. And I'm very, very pleased that I had the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and that the school board did the right thing back in 1946, and HCC continues to grow and flourish, and we greatly appreciate our partnership with the Board of Ed. 10 years ago, we started our early college program. We were the first in the state to start a program like the Essence program. It has flourished, and it's amazing how that word has become part of the language in our community. I hear it every month when people talk about early college. They have a preference for calling it the Essence program. And then, of course, I also want to thank you for the pilot we now have underway with the STEM Middle College. We have 12 students signed up in that program, and most of them will be graduating with their associate degree and their high school diploma probably at the age of 17 or 18. They're making great progress this semester. I think the selection process was absolutely ideal in identifying just the right students for that program. I know you all endorse choices for students, and the more choices we have, the better our educational model will be in the county. But I have, in my 13 years here, really enjoyed the partnership between the Board of Education and the community college, and absolutely terrific to be with you this evening and share the publication. I'd be pleased to respond to any questions. I've read through this thing so many times and have gone through it editing some of the chapters, working closely with the author. So although I'm relatively new to the community, I think I have the history down fairly well. Questions, comments?
Dr. Altieri, you didn't mention, but I'm sure it's in the book somewhere, the connection with the vocational program that was at the high school at that time.
Correct.
Was on the campus of
Yes.
the community college.
Yes, what is our career programs building today was the, I believe it was the original vocational technical high
That's
school
correct.
that the county had, and that was another wonderful gift the Board of Education gave the college, and that building continues to serve thousands of students each week. As you know, we went through a very major renovation of that building, and it continues to do extremely well. The other name that many of you know is Lois Smith. Lois Smith Harrison, who was the first registrar at the college, and she was responsible for rounding up the first class of students. And she has fascinating stories that have been woven into the book about going out to some of the farms in the county and talking to parents about college. And back in those days, people were not very receptive to everyone having the opportunity to go to college. That was for management personnel, not the workers. And Lois just did a terrific job. Many of you know the history of her father, Paul Smith, and his contributions to our community, and her husband, Dick Harrison, who she met on campus. And Doc Harrison was part of that first graduating class in 1948. And for you sports enthusiasts, we started the college in 46 and had a basketball team in 47 and cheerleaders in 48. That's moving fairly quickly on the athletic front. And Doc Harrison was part of that basketball team. And he earned his associate degree at the junior college and was admitted directly into the University of Maryland's dental school. Back then, you didn't need a bachelor's degree to enter dental school. So he really built off the math and science he had learned at the college, passed the admissions tests, and actually got his credentials as a dentist, being launched from Hagerstown Junior College. So just a lot of wonderful stories throughout the book, and I'm very, very pleased to share it with you. Again, I want to thank the school board for giving birth to HCC. It was a good decision, and I think it continues to pay dividends. So Thank you very much. I know you have a busy agenda, so I won't linger here, but
Thank you, Dr. Altieri. For the female sports fans, 1951 was the first women's college team in Maryland, basketball team, and that was established on HCC's campus as well.
yep, very good. He's been reading the advanced copy I gave him.
I did get the advanced copy. Thank you, Dr. Altieri.
Now, I'll just add, as every proud parent, there's nothing a parent likes more than to see their children grow up and succeed and flourish on their own. So you've clearly done that, and the college has clearly done
Well,
that.
thank you
And,
very, very much.
count us as proud parents.
Excellent, very good.
Thank you.
Have a good meeting. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that concludes my report. Thank you.
So next on the agenda is public comment. We have one individual who signed up to speak, Max Cross. We'd like to welcome you. The purpose of public comment is to hear input on things that we are considering, ideas for the school system. It's not really intended for a back and forth between members, but we have a short opportunity at the end to have some brief discussion, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. The guideline's 5 minutes. We won't cut you off in the middle of the
All right.
sentence, but we look forward to hearing from you. The floor is
Well,
yours.
Thank you, President Hardings, and good evening to you, Dr. Wilcox, and the board. My name is Max Cross, and I'm currently a freshman at The Ohio State University in Columbus, and I'm an alumni of the International Baccalaureate Association at North Hagerstown High School. And I'm here tonight to discuss why introducing the D letter grade sort of back into the school system would hurt the level of college and workforce readiness that students would have upon graduation from WCPS school. So with this new grading scheme in place, a student could theoretically graduate from a WCPS school with a GPA less than 2.0. At any major university in America, I know at Ohio State for sure, at University of Maryland I looked, a student with a GPA less than 2.0 in their system would be expelled from the university. So bringing back the D grade would lull students into thinking that they could get by with doing the bare minimum, which is in fact not true. This also applies in the workforce, where employers look for self-motivated students that put their heart and extra effort into their work. Mr. Ridenour was quoted as saying that students who score in the D range might have the same mastery of a subject as those that score in the B and C range due to not testing well or not doing the homework. While this may be true in reality, employers and universities respect mastery just as much as they do effort. And in the classes that I've taken at Ohio State so far, homework, quizzes, tests, and classwork were all given the same weight. Our message to students should be not only is that mastery of the material important, but applying the material is just as, if not more important. And in the end, it's the application of the material that earns the grade, and that's demonstrated to employers and universities. An employer and a university would rather take a student with a quality work ethic that studied tirelessly, came in for help on homework, and practiced hard enough that they performed well on the test, but doesn't necessarily have a mastery of the subject and earned a C in the course, than a student that knows the content extremely well, but slacked off and didn't do the homework and failed to perform well on tests, content in merely passing the courses with a D. By lowering the passing grade, you would be lowering the amount of work required for a student to be successful. As academic standards become higher across the country and across the world, the workforce is looking to hire students that go above and beyond what is required of the average student. Universities are looking for students that perform above the national and worldwide expectation. Lowering the passing grade to a D is lowering our expectations, while the workforce and academic world's expectations continue to rise. As the great American author Elbert Hubbard once said, where there's much expected from an individual, he may rise to the level of events and make the dream come true. We must make students rise to expectations rather than fall to lackluster standards. While I understand that many of the surrounding counties have this policy, Washington County should continue to remain different and set higher standards than that of other counties. In doing this, we'll continue to promote and strive for excellence while continuing to attract the brightest and best minds in Western Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Are there any brief comments and response from board members? Mrs. Harshman?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your view.
Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Ryder?
Just a couple of things, and I appreciate and not just appreciate, but respect, I think is the key word. I respect your view. I don't agree. I mean, I'd like to throw out a few analogies, but I think we would take up too much time. But not everyone. I mean, first of all, somebody with a 1.0 isn't going to college. Okay, and the odds are people aren't going to slack off to get a D, because a D is going to impact your GPA. Right now, students who make 60 to 69 have an opportunity through credit recovery to get a C. My point was, have they mastered any more by doing credit recovery than they already have with the grade of a 60 to 69, somewhere in that neighborhood of a D, as we would call it in my time. So I'm not just looking at, and the students who are in IB or AP classes or honors classes, whatever the case may be. I'm looking at those kids who are taking courses that 10, 15, 20 years ago they never would have thought of taking. Our Common Core is, and state law is telling us that every child will have to take 4 years of math. It's a good thing. However, years ago, how many kids took algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and a fourth math? Not many. And, speaking from personal experience without calling out her name, my niece, who was an honors student at Pomona University, which they always like to say is Harvard is the Pomona of the West. Her father told me he was never so happy to see a D in his life as he was when she got a D in calculus. It was not her strength. She had to take it, and he was thrilled, as was she, and she worked her brains out to get that D. So, I don't think you really heard everything I said, maybe, or maybe did not understand my perspective. I'm not just looking at the kids that are aspiring to college. I'm looking at the kids who are there that we have to educate. Some of them cannot do the things that you are able to do academically. There may be things that you can do, that they can do, that you can't do. You see where I'm coming from? So, like I said, I respect your opinion, but mine is a little broader, because I'm not just looking at those kids that are off to college. They're going to make their way. They have motivation. Maybe they have support at home. I'm also looking for those kids who may not have that support at home, who may not have those aspirations. We're going to push them, and maybe that that mindset of theirs will change over time. But until that it changes, I want them to have a fighting chance, to pass a class without taking credit recovery or without going to summer school, or whatever the case might be. I just think there's it's a lot deeper than just those kids who you think or others think are going to slack off because they can get a D. And a kid that's going to college or has aspirations to go to college, he isn't going to slack off to get a D. He isn't going to be satisfied with a D, because that 1.0 grade, the 1 point that he gets for that class is going to have a seriously negative impact on his GPA. And again, the kids that have a 1.0 grade point average, I doubt very seriously if they've thought about college. They're happy just to get through. So thank you. I really do mean that sincerely. Thank you for coming. It's thought-provoking, but I wanted you to understand where I was coming from also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Max, have a good one.
Any other brief comments from any members? All right. Thank you, Mr. Cross. We appreciate it. Are there any other members of the audience who wish to speak? Nobody else has signed up, but here's your opportunity. All right, we'll move on to old business. The first item is the consideration of the second reading of policy IGDK. That's participation on athletic teams and extracurricular activities.
Mr. President, if I might ask you to excuse me right now, I actually have an extracurricular activity to go to. Band concerts.
Good timing.
Crazy.
Good timing, but
Well, play well. I know you will.
heard of a lot of excuses to get out of a discussion.
Dr. Marco? Mr. Trotta, whoever.
Take the lead on this particular
All right.
one. The first reading of the proposed changes to policy IGDK, which is entitled Participation on Athletic Teams and Extracurricular Activities, was presented to the Board of Education at its public business meeting conducted on December 3rd. The Board of Education approved the first reading. Since the first reading, a public notice was placed on board docs, and members of the community were invited to provide comments. We have not received any comments regarding the proposed changes. During the Policy Committee's public meeting conducted today, the members of the committee examined the second paragraph in this policy, and it is now recommending that this paragraph be modified to state as follows. The Board of Education of Washington County recognizes its responsibility to protect the basic rights of students, but also the board is keenly conscious of developing and maintaining a high level of confidence in the county's schools. The Policy Committee is requesting the approval of this modification and the second reading of policy IGDK. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the second reading of revised policy IGDK, participation on athletic teams and extracurricular activities.
Motion by Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Fisher has the right to speak first.
I think this was made clear before, but I'll just reiterate it. There's quite a bit of this policy that has been stricken. It's not going to be lost. It's going to be put in regulations. Regulations are easier to change than policies should the need occur, and that's the main reason for moving the items that are stricken, or the reason for having them stricken. They will be in regulations.
Mr. Bailey?
The comments my colleague just made probably are going to answer my question. I've heard the rules challenged numerous times in our system, and the part that continually reoccurs is did the violation occur on school property or off of school property? And a case was tried and made some years ago based on whether it occurred on the school property or whether it was off property. So I don't know if the regs will address that. Hopefully they will. But that's an area that I think that needs some consideration.
Are there other comments? If there are no other comments, the question is on Mrs. Fisher's motion to approve the second read of policy IGDK. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next, under old business, is consideration of the second read of revised policies IGDL, IKF, and IKF.
Thank you. The first reading of the proposed changes to policy IKF entitled Graduation Requirements and policy IGDL entitled Student Activities Eligibility High Schools was approved by the Board of Education on November 5th at its public business meeting. Since the first reading, a public notice was placed on board docs, and the community was requested to provide comments. No comments have been received. During the Policy Committee's public meeting conducted today, the members of the committee examined paragraph 3A in policy IGDL, and they agreed that the original language in the policy should be retained. And I will read the original language that appears in paragraph 3. A student who fails 2 or more courses in a marking period is ineligible. The Policy Committee is requesting the approval of this modification and the second reading of these two policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. President. Do you
For
want
the-
the?
If you could just.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for approval of the second read of revised policy IGDL. No, that's the wrong one.
That's correct.
No, that is the right one. Student activities eligibility, high schools, and revised policy IFK, graduation requirements.
Commonly known as IKF.
IKF, right, okay.
So Mr. Ridenhour moves for approval.
IKF.
Is there a second?
Looking at two of them
I'll
that are
second.
different.
Thanks, Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Brightman?
Question, just, I guess out of curiosity, under the number 1, the extracurricular activities or those activities which ordinarily occur outside of the school day, including athletics, clubs, plays, etc. To clubs, would that actually include student government? And is there such a thing as eligibility for, that seems like a very broad, the use of clubs. And I know student government members are elected by the student body to represent. So I'm trying to figure out whether they would be eligible, what the qualifications are, whether this policy would touch them or not.
We are required to have a student government and at each school, each high school anyway. And I have seen where students have lost their leadership role in student government because they became ineligible and the time commitment required for that. But there's several members of student government who are not officers. So what I've seen in practice, and it's not that I've ever seen it in writing, but what I've seen in practice is that students who become ineligible when they're on the student government lose their office but don't lose their membership in student government.
Is that in their bylaws or just a best practice?
I couldn't say for sure, but I could certainly check on that
I
for
think
you.
Amanda's shaking her head behind you that it's in the bylaws.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
To me, the most notable change to this policy is that students who are ineligible with this new policy will be able to participate in practices. That's correct?
That's correct.
And I guess I'm wanting some reasoning, some rationale. To me, a student who is in difficulty academically would need every minute to spend either with a tutor or doing homework or studying. And I fail to see how it would be beneficial to a student who is having difficulty academically to give up that much needed time for study and tutoring for practice and then be denied the opportunity then to participate in the culminating activity, which would be the game or the competition or performance. So I need some help in understanding what the thinking is with regard to this change.
Well, I'll take a crack at it since I was in the meeting. I think the thinking is that for some students, the ability to participate in athletics is a big motivator to keep them in school. And number two, for many students who play athletics, the coach is probably one of the best mentors that they have in the school system. And allowing us, and this is the discussion we had somewhat in the policy committee, is that allowing a student to practice where every day they are going to see that mentor who wants to help the student become eligible because they want the student to play and because I think they want to see the student succeed, is somebody within the school system that they might contact every day that will help motivate and push them towards better academic performance. Does that capture
I think that's very true. In addition to that, we've had some issues with policies earlier and some issues with the state over the start of school because we were worried about the conditioning of our athletes. I don't know if you remember this or not, but we didn't have as many practice days as many as the other school systems did because of when we start and so on. And our athletes don't get as much practice, and therefore they're more likely to be injured. And part of the thinking of this also was, though a student may become ineligible, there may be he or she may get that eligibility back and be able to continue on the team, but if they haven't done any practicing in the meantime, they would lose that conditioning, and when they came back into the game, they might be more likely to suffer an injury again. Now, that, of course, doesn't so much cross over to the other types of activities. That would just be the athletics.
I guess the difficulty that I'm having is understanding how this coach who is going to be mentoring and inspiring is going to find additional time for the student to complete the missing homework, if that's the issue, or to study, or to be tutored. I'm struggling with that. I'm not discounting the importance of a coach in inspiring and providing motivation, but I'm really struggling with this.
I have mixed feelings about this too, because in a way I believe that the student needs that time to study, but also I don't know a lot of coaches. I do know one coach in particular that while his team is waiting to use the gym, he makes them study. He stands over them and makes them study. He's very active in contacting their teachers to make sure they're doing their homework and so on, and he does take the extra time. And the only reason I know this is he works for my husband too, but I can't speak for all coaches, but I know he does. And I think that the coaches that are really devoted, I think, really do concern themselves with the educational side of their students, not just their athletic prowess.
Mr. Wright, now
Well,
seeking recognition.
I would just speak to personal experience. I kept very close tabs on my kids, and it was easier for me to keep tabs because I was there. And yet there were times when it was like pulling teeth to get teachers to fill out a weekly grade report so that I knew what was going on. And trust me, kids would much rather walk into their teacher's classroom and take a 0 than they would meet me when I found out that they took a 0. But the point I'm trying to make is that, if a kid was, or if one of my players was struggling, he was in my classroom after school. If we had a late practice, he was in my classroom after school doing homework, getting help, or he was in the classroom of a teacher that he was struggling with that I set up. If we had early practices, he had to show me his homework the next morning. Most coaches, take that time to do it. And consequently, that's why I think it's very important that contact is there. They are, as Dr. Harding said, they're probably, for a lot of kids, they are the preeminent mentor that they have. And there is no guarantee, and we can say all that we want, well, they need every minute they have to go home and study. Well, good luck with that. We don't have any control when they walk out the door. If my kids are with me 4 hours every night for practice and tutoring or practice and homework, they're getting done things that they might not get done if they're ineligible and they're out. They're going. And we spent, in the last 10 years since I've been on the board, we have spent guaranteed millions of dollars on dropout prevention, on credit recovery, and other programs to help our kids graduate, to help our kids succeed. Kids that may not have on their own the drive for academic success. And yet right here in this is probably the most successful dropout program that we have in Washington County Public Schools, and that's athletics. And people can say all they want that, and I hear this over and over again, well, it's not a right, it's a privilege. That is absolutely correct. But public education is not a right. There isn't anything in the Constitution that says anything about public education. Lawmakers decided at some point that it was a good idea, and we want our kids to get a public education. They have a right to a public education. So, you know, I think this is a very good step. There, believe it or not, there are things in here that I don't particularly care for, but I think that they're taking steps in the right direction to make certain that our kids, you know, have something that they can latch on to. We can't do a thing with them unless they're in that building. Not one thing. And if this brings them in that building and 70, 80% of them succeed as a result of that, I'm all for it.
I would add that the high school principals have wanted this change for quite a long time. It's something that we talked about for years. Frederick County does it this way, and we are in a league with Frederick County, and so, you know, we communicate when we have league meetings. And I think the advantage we see to it is that in our current system, athletics are only a carrot as a reward, and, you know, allowing you to participate and do something fun that you like, even if you maybe don't love academics, but you will put up with academics in order to have that opportunity to play sports. And it only acts as an incentive for the way our seasons line up with our marking periods, maybe twice a year, where it lines up that, okay, a sport is coming, if I get a passing grade, I'll get to play. And so if that doesn't happen, then it's all over with for you, and like, forget it. So it doesn't act as a carrot again because you stay ineligible for so long. But by making this change, athletics remain a carrot all year long, that, okay, I slipped up, I fell behind, but if I keep working hard, in 4 weeks, I could be eligible again. And that wouldn't be true if I'm just completely off the team and not practicing anymore and not doing those things. So it's also tough for an athlete to work hard and practice for 4 weeks and not get to go out there and play in the game. So if they're willing to do that for that opportunity, then athletics are doing what we want them to do, and that is act as a carrot, as a reward for doing your schoolwork and doing well in academics. So like I say, I think what principals have felt for years is that athletics really only act as a carrot twice a year. And this makes it a permanent carrot that stays out there saying, you know, I know you've slipped, but keep on working, and there's, you know, you can reach that carrot. And so, you know, it just helps us, I think, to, or what we're hoping is that it's going to help us keep some of those kids who only really care about athletics, and that we're working hard to get them to care about their academics. So that's why, like I say, this has been a matter of discussion probably for a decade among the high school principals, that we've been hoping to make this change.
Good.
I was just going to say, you know, I look at this as being pro-kid, and when I say that, what I mean is I think we as a system need more tools to engage kids. I think when you walk the halls of a high school today, some kids are engaged because they just love learning, they love school, but there are a lot of other kids that for whatever reason they're dancing to a little bit different drummer. Whether it's a club, whether it's student government, whether it's drama, band, debate club, whether it's staying with the athletic team, even when things are really rough for you, I want a way to engage you. And so that's why I support this policy change, is because I think it gives us one more lever to engage kids. The kids may not have the maturity to really appreciate what I'm saying right now about being engaged, but I think the more time we have kids with responsible adults, the greater likelihood of that kicking in and taking place. So, you know, I would appreciate the board's support on this as a tool. We will continue to evaluate it. If we think that some coaches are not actively supporting the academic progress of their kids, then we'll come back to you with a policy recommendation that perhaps returns. But again, I would urge the board to support this on the basis of it's one more opportunity for us to engage high school students who, quite honestly, and I live with one who is very engaged, so I'm blessed with that. But when I look at a number of the kids who come to our house, not all of them are. And so I think this gives us that one more opportunity.
Ms. Harshman, you wanted to?
Well, I too have concerns, and I think I expressed some of them in the policy meeting. And in addition to the idea of spending time practicing maybe 5 nights a week, and I know for a fact, because as a recently retired teacher, there were many coaches who spent time with their teams, but I didn't see anybody sitting and working on homework, even the ones who had not been eligible. So it does concern me that a coach would have enough time to do that and handle his coaching responsibilities. Also, number 6 on this list says that students who were ineligible due to their most recent marking period grades become eligible for full participation if their interim report indicates that they are passing all classes. However, they do not become ineligible if they end up in the middle of the marking period failing. And that's another concern of mine, because if you have not gotten to a point where you are somewhat passing in the middle of the marking period, you're playing catch up. And one of the things I always told my kids was it's a lot easier to slow down than it is to speed up at the end, because you're really playing with fire if you think you can do enough to get yourself in a passing situation. So I have problems with that also. So because of that, I will not be voting for this.
Mrs. Brightman, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Bailey again.
Just, I guess, a question, and Dr. Wilcox may have already addressed it, but I assume that carrot extends to marching band and chorus and theater, the practice part of this.
It's all extracurricular activity.
All extracurricular activity. And I guess I would add to my support of this is that I think in 2 years, the mandated age that children need to stay in school is moved up to 18. So we're going to have older students who probably may have considered dropping out. So we have another group of students who we're going to have to work a lot harder to keep in the schools and to help give them reasons to stay in the schools. So I think that's an important aspect of this. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
I think there have been excellent reasons given, and President Hardings, your opening remarks regarding why this is important and the coaching mentor role and so forth, extremely important. And I'm not going to tell you anything that you already don't know, but this carries over into college. The same program. If a youngster goes into an athletic program in college, the first thing that a coach does is assign them a mentor. And they must maintain the grade point average in order to be eligible. But when they're not eligible, for some reason or another, they continue to do the work and continue to practice with the teams and work on improving the academics that they're doing. So this is a very similar thing that they do at that level as we do here in the secondary level. So I support this, and I think it saves an awful lot of kids. An awful lot of kids are not on the street pushing drugs and other vices because of programs like this.
Are there any other comments? If not, the question is on Mr. Ridenour's motion to approve the 2 policies. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 6-1. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of Mr. Ridenour's amendment to Mrs. Fisher's motion to approve the second read of policy IKC. Just for the information of all members and for those who may be here watching or listening, at the November 19th Board of Education meeting, Mrs. Fisher offered a motion to approve the second read of policy IKC. Mr. Ridenour offered an amendment to that motion, which was seconded. We then had some discussion of it, and Mrs. Brightman made a motion to postpone action on that amendment to today's meeting. So the parliamentary position we pick up in is the pending business is Mr. Ridenhour's amendment. It doesn't require a motion or amendment, or a motion or a second, because it's already been moved. I provided for all of the members a copy of the minutes, at least that page of minutes from the November 19th meeting, so that everybody can see what the amendment was, and I will just read it briefly so that everybody is, so I'm sure everybody is on the same page. It says, Mr. Ridenhour made a motion to amend policy IKC to include 60 to 69 with a 1-point weight average and 0 to 59 for non-weighted courses. 60 to 69 with a 1.18 weight average and 0 to 59 for accelerated weighted courses, and 60 to 69 with a 2.0 weight average and 0 to 59 for advanced placement weighted courses. So that's where we pick up the discussion, and the floor is open for discussion on Mr. Ridenhour's amendment. Mrs. Harshman?
You'll have to stop me if I'm in the wrong place to do this, but
Okay.
I wanted to make a motion to amend this with the exclusion of weighted classes for the D.
So you're offering an amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
That,
In other words, to accept the 60 to 69 for regular on-grade level classes, but anything that is weighted, and I believe we got some information from North High teachers that support the idea of excluding the weighted classes or the IB or AP classes. So I would like to move that we exclude those from the D.
okay, that motion is in order. You can't amend an amendment. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll
There is-
second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Harshman, you have the right to speak first to your amendment.
Well, I agree
I'm
with
sorry, did I
Max.
say Mrs. Fisher? I meant Mrs.
That's all right.
I agree with Max. I think that we are in a time where we're pushing teachers to have classes that have more rigor and are pushing the students to do better. And when you put a D in front of an AP student or an IB or a weighted class, an honors class, you're telling them that that's all right to have that. And I don't think any college would accept a D as a passing grade. And I could be wrong there, but I know that it is frowned upon by most, and in most cases it means they have not passed the course. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Mrs. Fisher?
I seconded this amendment because I wanted there to be more of a discussion on this issue. Not that I necessarily fully agree with I'm on the fence about the accelerated courses, but I would like to ask permission to have Mr. Akers speak to the survey that he did in reference to this.
I conducted 2 surveys, one with principals of secondary schools and one with teachers of secondary schools. Of the principals, I had 17 principals weigh in on the survey, and 15 of the 17 supported moving to reinstituting the D. And I'll get the exact number here for teachers because there was a lot more of those. There were 459 teachers who responded to the survey. Just about 62% of the teachers were in support of, and about 24% were against reinstituting the D. And of those 24 who were against it, it was only 11% of those strongly disagreed with it. So almost 2.5 times as many teachers supported reinstituting the D as opposed to disagreeing with it.
But didn't you also get some information about their opinion on the accelerated courses?
The weighted versus
The weighted?
No, they didn't comment on the weighted piece. What they commented on, the other thing they responded to were questions about using floor grades and whether floor grades would be a practice that would be needed if the D were reinstituted. And the majority of teachers said that floor grades would no longer be needed. But we really didn't get into the weighted versus non-weighted question.
Mrs. Williams?
That's my question with regard, if this policy does carry and is approved, and we reinstitute the D, then what happens with floor grades? What is the process? It's just noted that they're no longer going to exist as a practice, or what happens there?
Floor grades are not obviously a policy. It's more of a practice that's been developed through school improvement processes where, you know, for example, you see that you have a very high failure rate for freshmen, so you might put a floor grade in for freshmen to help them through that transition so they don't do so bad their first marking period that they can't possibly pass. I think we've all seen the data that shows the big spike in failures for freshmen. But when we went to year-long courses, that's when a lot of schools looked at floor grades, that a student's going to be in a class for 180 days, and after 1/4 of that amount of time, their grade could be so low that they're going to be in there for 3/4 of the year knowing mathematically they can't pass. And so floor grades were sort of a school improvement idea to help prevent that from happening. But when you do the math, you know, once the D is reinstated, there's really no mathematical reason. It would be very hard for a student to eliminate himself in one marking period, because a student, you know, when you add up 4 passing grades right now, it's 280 points that a student has to earn to get that bare minimum passing grade. So you can see what happens if a student gets a 10 or 15%, it's nearly impossible for them to pass. But when you add 4 60s together, that's 240. And so even if you get a very low grade that first marking period, a student can still recover without having to get 95 every marking period. So it just wouldn't really be necessary, because the problem that floor grades address really wouldn't exist anymore. It's more of a matter of math than anything else, that it just wouldn't be mathematically necessary anymore.
So would schools be told that it's no longer an option as part of their school improvement plan to have this practice of floor grades?
Right. We would.
Should we
it
have
would
the
start
date?
with, yeah. It would start with a discussion with and leadership council with principals. You know, that they understand the change and what the implications are, and that school improvement process is no longer necessary, because principals obviously have a lot of input into those school improvement processes, and when they understood the math of it, and most of the principals who responded said it wouldn't be necessary. Now, some of the teachers and some of the principals said, well, there might be occasions when it's necessary, but I think when they sit down and do the math, and they'll see that it's just not, it's not a strategy that's going to get them anything anymore. So they'll be looking for other strategies to deal with other school improvement issues. But yeah, it's not a practice I would support if we were to, you know, reinstitute the D. I just don't think it's necessary. It would probably lower the bar too much to have a floor grade at that point.
Is there other discussion, Mrs. Fisher?
If I may ask Mr. Akers, were you able to obtain information about the computer and whether we can actually even compute this if we eliminate the 60 to 69 for weighted classes? You were going to check with somebody in technology, I think.
Yeah, well, what I was looking at, what I went to check on was whether we could compute weighted courses the same as non-weighted courses. So the question was, could we make a weighted D a 1 and not a 1.18, so that you don't receive any advantage for getting a D in a weighted course? And yes, I got the answer to that, and the answer is yes. If we can set the quality points based on the grade. So for a weighted course, we could say a D is a 1, period, same as it is for a non-weighted course.
What difference does it make?
Very little. Mathematically, it makes
Well,
very
I mean,
little
but I mean, even philosophically, I mean, what difference does it make whether it's 1.18 or 1?
That isn't what we
You know,
did.
once we've said that there's a D, and I understand what the motion is to say no D, it seems to me that it's kind of, you know, tilting at windmills. The larger question is, the work is substantively different in an accelerated or a weighted course. So philosophically, why would we say that a D had no value there if a D has value in another course? Now, I mean, I heard what Max said, and I apologize for being informal, but just because I know you through my association with the high school. And by the way, you have probably the most marvelous voice in public address. So I've wanted to say that since I heard your first game. But I think here, for kids who are taking AP courses and IB courses who are no longer in the Val-Sal race, which frankly is very few kids. I mean, 15 to 20 kids are in that race after about 6 months. Because once you get your first B, you're out of the run. So the question that I really have for the board to consider is, the real value in those courses then becomes the AP exam or the IB exam. And there the score is, you've got to have a 3 or better, or in some cases a 4 or better on the AP exam, and you really need 5 out of 7 on the IB exam for it to be meritorious for you. So it's no longer about the GPA. So I guess the question I'm really asking is, why would we lose a lot of sleep over the D? I mean,
Well, and Dr. Wilcox, if I could add, if they don't get that D, and you're talking, you know, maybe...
Because the F hurts them.
Well, not only it hurts them, but it could prevent them from graduating.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about a senior in an AP English class who was talked into taking AP because they did really well their junior year in English, and hey, I think you can do it. And a lot of times kids take the SAT or the PSAT, and they get a letter from us that comes to us. We get a list from the College Board that says this kid has potential, and so we go to the kid and say, hey, this letter says you have potential, and the kid says, okay, well, I'll try it, and then he gets in that AP class and he's in over his head, and maybe he's in over his head because of all the other courses he's taking at the same time.
And he's not a basketball player who's ineligible, so he can't get the tutoring.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
So, but if that happens, now you've got a senior who isn't going to graduate because if they don't get that D credit.
Mr. Ridenhour's been trying to get in.
No, and again, I'm speaking to the motion, to amend my motion. I do not know of a person taking an accelerated class who aspires to a D. I cannot figure that out for the life of me. You know, it may happen, but I don't think they aspire to that. They're not going to play down to a D, because that's going to kill their GPA just as much as an F. And their ability to get into a college that they may want to get into is going to be impacted by this. And there's no escaping this unless you take the class over again, because this is a legitimate grade now. Okay? We've been doing it for so long that it's become almost old hat. If you are, you know, if you're 2 or 3 points below a C, you can take credit recovery and you get that C. You know, for the kid that wants to go to college, that wants to get into good college and wants a higher GPA, you know, they're not going to aspire to a D. So I don't see how this is going to change anything other than give consistency as far as, you know, what quality points come with particular classes.
There's no credit recovery for IB Spanish. There's no credit. I mean, so these kids don't have that option. If they get in over their heads, they're over their heads. Right.
Well, I think we'll get a better idea of, you know, for kids that are taking AP tests, not IB, maybe a little bit different, obviously. AP and even IB though, we're going to get a better idea with, this. If somebody gets a 2 and they have a B or a C, I want to know why. Okay, why didn't they pass it? Okay, if they get a D and they get a 2, it's already explained to me. They didn't do enough or they couldn't get enough to get the 3. So I think, this extra grade is going to tell us a little more. It's going to also, as I said earlier, and again, well, I won't speak to that because that's not what we're addressing at this point. My apologies, Mr. President.
That's okay. I would just say on the amendment, the reason I don't support it is if we as a system are going to say that 65% should be enough to get credit, then it should be enough to get credit in whatever class you're taking. If we as a system say 65% is not enough to get credit, then we should say it's not enough to get credit in any class you're taking. Providing a little more than 1 point, is it harder to get a D if there were a D in an AP class than in a non-weighted class? I would hope so. And I would ask Mr. Akers, do you have any idea how many students last year failed an AP class?
I don't know offhand, but I can tell you in my experience,
Is it 50%? Is it 30%? Is it 10%?
Below
2%?
5%, I would say. Well below 5%.
And the final thing I would say is if we were to adopt the amendment, which would provide no D for accelerated classes and a D for non-accelerated classes, we sort of created what I think is the wrong incentive, which is if you're a student who's inclined to reach, and we've talked a lot about finding kids who might not otherwise be taking AP classes and encouraging them to take them. And if now they find out, gee, I'm taking a bigger risk now because if I get a 65, which is not maybe what they aspire to, but some kids think this way. As Dr. Wilcox said, they don't necessarily have the perspective that we do as adults. It's taking a risk because I may fail that class if it's AP, whereas if it's a regular class, I got more flexibility. I don't like that kids think that way, but I think some do. So for those reasons, I'll oppose the amendment. Are there any other comments, Ms. Harshman?
Well, first of all, I don't know of any student who aspires to a D, whether he's AP or IB or straight grade level or below grade level. But my concern is that if you are AP, you are in a college class. Should you get a D in an AP college class? And should that be okay?
Are there any other comments? If not, the question is on Mrs. Harshman's amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? The motion fails 1-6. So we return to the question of Mr. Ridenhour's amendment. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. And the question is on the approval of Mr. Ridenhour's amendment. All those in favor? All those opposed? The amendment passes 6-1. We now return to the main motion, which is the motion to approve the second read of policy IKC. Is there any further discussion?
Just a point of order, Mr. President, because I don't want this to go down to the wire and something. The red statement at the bottom, which says this policy will not become effective until the 2014-15 school year. That's not what the amendment was attached to. This was added after my amendment, my motion in I believe it was November 19th.
November 19th.
Consequently, what I'm stating is there's got to be an amendment to add this, or we will be voting on the policy without that language. Am I correct?
Well, I would say that in the policy we just approved, in the policy committee, we made a change between first and second read that was then approved by the full
But
board.
we were on second read. We
We're
were
on.
voting on second read. You know, when this took place on 11/19, this was a second read. My motion was attached to the second read. I mean, I have no problem making a motion to, I mean, I don't like the date. You may not like my motion, but I think we have to have a motion for this date to be included in the policy. Am I correct? Do we have our Robert's Rules of Order people? I mean, the policy that was amended did not include this language.
That was added after
After second read had already been,
it went back.
But it was on here.
Well, we can
voted.
resolve this if there's a motion to amend the policy to add the language that states that the
or
policy.
any other.
Or any other regarding when the policy would go into effect.
Mr. President, I move that the policy become effective at the end of the first semester, 2013-2014 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Brightman. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Well, since I made it, I'll go ahead. I'd like to see it, you know, we've asked a lot of our kids this year, we've asked a lot of our teachers, we've asked a lot of everybody in regards to the new curriculums, the new teaching methods, the new emphasis on critical thinking and everything else. I want to give kids a little bit of a Christmas present and say to them, there's a safety net here, folks. You know, don't abuse it, but there is a safety net here. I think the only thing that is difficult with this will be that our staff is going to have to do some work with the software, or you know, as far as the timing is concerned. It's going to happen sometime. It's just a matter of now or at the beginning of the next school year.
Mr. Akers, could you address Mr. Ridenour's question about what position this date would put teachers in, or grading, or do you see some complications here?
I would definitely see some complications in that if we started at the end of the semester, that means there'll be some students who took a course this year and earned a 60 and it was a failing grade. Courses, students take the same course the second semester this year and it would be a passing grade. And then most of our core courses, all of our core courses in high school are year long. And so when the class started, when teachers prepared their materials, created the grading rubrics, et cetera, it was based on the assumption that a 69 was failing. And you know, that, does that make a difference? I'd have to ask a teacher, but I think there would be some complications. I'm not sure if what Mr. Ridenour was speaking to, the piece about the computer. I would have to talk to our data processing people to know whether in the same year we could have two different passing grades. I imagine one way or the other they could make it work, but it would be something very different, something I've never seen, where after the start of the year the passing score changed.
But the grade itself does not change. You understand where I'm coming from, Mr. Akers? You get 60, it's a 60. You get a 70, it's a 70. You know, only thing we're saying is this is now a D instead of an F. That's it. You're still going to get the same grade. I don't see it as, to me, it's not mind-boggling, and it's not an issue. I mean, I would say do it today, and if you get a 60, you don't have to worry about recovering the credit if it's a semesterized course. How many of those do we have?
How many
Courses that are
semesterized
going to
courses?
finish in January.
our CTE courses, most of our fine arts courses.
The half-credit course.
Well, foreign languages year-long, but all our physical education courses. Really, everything other than, for the most part, everything other than math, English, social studies, science, and foreign language is semesterized. So it's a fair amount of courses.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment? I'll just say I'm not going to support the amendment because of that issue. I think if we're going to implement a start date, I think it needs to be at the beginning of the school year. I think the rules need to be this. I don't think we can change. I don't like changing the rules in the middle of the game. So I think it should start 2014, 2015, and it's because of the semesterized question. If a student took an art class in the fall semester and got a 65 and failed the class, and their cousin takes the class in the spring semester and gets a 65 and passes the class, I can't wrap my head around that. So I will certainly support having it start in 2014, 2015, but I can't support having it start in the next semester.
My question would be, we passed it. If it passed, we've passed the D. We're adding the D. Okay, for all intents and purposes. If the policy goes into effect immediately, it does not impact. Really doesn't change anything other than the fact that somebody gets between 60 and 69 will pass the class for this semester. They're still getting the same grade. They're going to pass it for this semester, and it would continue on through the remainder of the year. The teacher's not going to have to change anything as far as what they've done, how they've graded. It's just now, from 60 to 69, you're getting a point. That's all. I mean, I be truthful with you. I mean, I'm not going to lose a monumental amount of sleep over this particular amendment. I just feel like, why not? Why not give a person a chance who has that grade, that 60 to 69, give them a chance to get a credit.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment? If not, the question's on Mr. Ridenhour's amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? The motion fails, 1 in favor and 6 opposed. Are there any other amendments?
Do we now have to?
Well, the question is there amendment to set a different start date for the policy?
Mr. President, I'd like to move to amend to a 2014-2015 school year start date for this new grading IKC.
Amendment offered by Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion on that amendment? If not, the question is on Mrs. Brightman's amendment. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Mrs. Harshman, I didn't record a vote.
That's not an option.
It's just an amendment to.
Okay, I can vote for that.
So we'll take the vote again, just so I'm clear. All those in favor of Mrs. Brightman's amendment? All those opposed? The motion passes 7-0. We now return to the main motion by Mrs. Fisher. It seems like forever ago you made that motion, Mrs. Fisher.
What was that motion?
As amended. Is there any further discussion?
So the discussion is on the entire policy at this point, Mr. President?
The item on the table is, or on the floor is final passage, yes, of second reading. Everybody clear on? All right, if there's no more discussion, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 6-1. Thank you for working with this gentleman and Dr. Domain.
Mr. President, I commend you on your Robert's rules.
You guys are pushing me here. I'm going to dust off not just the abridged version, but the full 1,000-page version. Next on the agenda is the consideration of the consent agenda.
Where is that? There we go.
Good evening, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board. 4 procurement action items for your consideration on the evening's agenda. The first is a RFP 2014-26, the Consultant for Employee Benefits Program. 5 proposals were received. The Employee Benefits Program includes medical, prescription, drug, dental, vision, life insurance, flexible spend, long-term disability, accident and death and dismemberment insurance, as well as a wellness program. Consultant services are needed to assist WCPS staff with the management of our benefits program. This contract is a combination of a firm fixed lump sum annual price for the services that were defined within the scope of the solicitation. It also includes fixed unit prices for any quantities of work outside the scope of services that were specified. A 3-year contract is being recommended to be awarded to Bolton Partners of Baltimore, Maryland, at a total cost of $216,360 for the 3-year contract. Bolton Partners was also the lowest cost among the participating bidders. The second item on your agenda are Ethernet switches that are needed for Boonesboro High School. The equipment at Boonesboro High School is needed to replace the aging Nortel equipment. Staff is recommending that the order be placed to Skyline Network Engineering, utilizing the Carroll County contract at a cost of $66,216. Third item on the agenda is the lease of 10 copiers for the Administration Center. We received 3 quotes utilizing a specification for a 60-month lease of the 10 copiers, and are recommending that we move forward and accept the proposal from Centric Business Systems for 10 Ricoh copiers at a monthly cost of $3,726.87. The final item this evening from my bids is a contract to provide maintenance services and supplies to our copiers. The 72 copiers that the school system now owns under that OSA contract that the board authorized at the last board meeting. The PRC discussed this contract and recommends moving forward with Canon Solutions at a total cost of $173,664 a year. The potential does exist for us to remove some of the copiers from service during that time, which would reduce the cost of that maintenance contract. Any questions for me this evening?
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move to approve the purchase of consulting services from Bolton Partners, Inc. for a 3-year contract with options to extend at $216,360. Ethernet switches for Boonesboro High School to Skyline Network Engineering at $62,216.
66,000.
Thank you. 66, what did I say?
We got your back. You said 62.
$66,216. Lease 10 copiers for a 63-month period from Centric Business Systems at $44,722.44 per year, and maintenance service and/or service supplies for 72 OCE copiers from Canon Solutions America, Inc. at $173,664 per year.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Fisher?
How many copiers are there currently in the central office, and what condition are they in?
What was the question? The second
How
part of the
many
question?
copiers presently exist in the central office? We're talking about buying 10 for the administrative center. And what condition are those presently in?
Well, under the lease, the ones that we acquired, because there are within this building some non-OSE copiers. Just on the OSE copiers that we just recently acquired, there is a total of 8 within this facility currently. And I don't have the condition is they're in good operating condition. I have the number of copies that each machine has produced over the 5 years of the copier lease. And it does vary from as little as 495,000 copies up to about 1.4 million copies. So there is some variability in the usage that the machines have.
So this
here.
lease is not necessarily for new copiers. We are continuing to lease the existing ones?
No, what we would do is we would look at the existing inventory and redeploy some of the copiers to schools who need additional copier service. So we would get 10 new copiers, yes.
But then we have to continue to lease the ones that already exist. Isn't that an
Well, we would
additional
own
expense yet?
these. This is just for the maintenance and supplies to be able to continue to operate those copiers.
Okay, thank you.
They do require regular maintenance, and the vendor provides everything but the paper under the maintenance agreement. Did I answer your question? You still look puzzled.
So then, number 4, that maintenance takes care of the ones that are already existing in the central office. We don't have to pay lease on them, we're just going to have to, in future,
That's correct.
pay for the
The 10, and
maintenance
then
and
there are
supplies. Okay.
the 60 out in the schools.
Now I'm straight, thank you.
Okay, I apologize. There was 3 different action items associated with this copiers transaction.
Mrs. Williams?
Just to clarify, the 8 that are here now at central office will be sent to schools, and we'll start with 10 new copiers on the Downsville Pike.
That's
Is that-
correct.
That's
the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Brighton?
On the consultant for employee benefits programs, you mentioned in the first paragraph of the summary that the solicitation, the RFP document was available to other firms through the purchasing website. Has your department been tracking those? Are people or companies reaching out to that and watching that? Are we getting bids from that tool? Or are we still, because it said that you actually solicited 10 bids yourselves inside, so how many outside coming in are we getting?
I think on this particular bid, we had 1 additional company that wasn't on our original list, is my recollection. It's still fairly recent that we're able to actively bid in multiple categories, and the vendor pool is sufficient within the software, since we really just adopted the software program in July. So we're still registering vendors to our system. So we'll be in a transition for about a year before we can rely on automation within the software to issue the solicitation, to let the vendors know that the solicitation is available for them.
That's what I was
to get.
asking. What are we doing for an outreach to be sure they know that they can use this process?
Well, I try to let everybody I can know, the vendors know about the website, and really try to promote and encourage them to register. We are seeing increases in vendor registration, every week. More and more companies are signing on. So it's been a really great tool for communicating with the vendor community, and it is increasing weekly, really, the number of companies that are coming to the website to register.
I think it's important to have that tool and for vendors to know that that's available to them. Going on a little bit further, when I see that the services are for a 3-year period with a multi-year renewal option, and you may have to correct me on this one, but didn't we just do a procurement policy where we set a very specific number of years when we would go out and retest a contract? And does this not meet that new procurement policy by putting a multi-year renewal option in there? Aren't we mandated by the procurement policy to test the market?
That's not my interpretation of the new language. My understanding was that, when we engage in a multi-year contract, sometimes we get a cost advantage, price advantage by agreeing to a 3-year agreement versus a 1-year agreement. Usually the contracts, and this particular contract is going to utilize the standard Washington County Public Schools Professional Services Agreement form. And it has a clause in there allowing us to cancel within 30 days notice, I believe, without cause for any reason. So in some cases it's advantageous for us to go forward with a 3-year contract, knowing that we do have an out if we want to, a convenience clause per se, to move away from it. Anyway, my interpretation.
Yeah, I understand the 3-year. I think that's within the policy. It's the additional multi-year renewal option. By putting that in there, are we misrepresenting to the company? I don't believe, we can guarantee a multi-year option.
No, and it's written very much as a, I can't recall whether it was cooperative or unilateral that we could exercise that option, but the new policy does require me to bring renewals to the board. So before any action would be taken on that, I would be bringing that forward to you.
All right, and then where you're, I think it's 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down, you talk about fixed unit prices, labor rates for work outside the scope of this contract. Is there a cap on outside of scope work? And who determines off contract? Who has the authority to determine what is, because this is over and above the price we're voting on tonight?
The contract specifications were developed and were very specific about the services that are to be included in those annual rates. In fact, we were very prescriptive about that. So it's a fairly clear differentiation between what a special project would be versus the required services that we're paying for as part of that lump sum bid. The special projects were fairly defined in the document as, like, if an analysis had to be done on a product or something that was outside of the normal services that were specified here, then that would be a special project. I don't know if
would that come before the superintendent or the board for authority?
I guess it would depend on the total.
The total amount.
There were very few examples we were able to come up with of those. It was more or less an insurance policy. If we're working with the consultant and during the course of those services, the board would elect to need a small project undertaken that was related but not covered under the agreement. We would have the ability to do that.
So if we didn't have the ability in-house to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Oh, excuse me, one other. On the 10 copiers, and I guess I'm going to start switching from textbooks to copiers now, but With the electronic capability of storing and retrieving, how are we balancing the cost of copiers with the ability to maintain, store, and retrieve electronically?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question for you this evening. I know that one of the advantages of standardizing to the all 10 new copiers at the new central office building is it gives Arnold and the IT department team better capabilities of monitoring the usage, which through the network. I don't know whether that would reduce their storage requirements. The copiers don't per se store any files that I'm aware of for the.
No, but they're all network copiers, so as people have individual PCs or documents that they've created, they'll reside on the PC and then be printed as needed. So in essence, we'll move to a real-time copy solution within that building. But the other thing you should keep in mind is we hope to drive some of our unit costs down by driving many of our print solutions at the central office, not to an individual copier located on the floor, but actually down to the print shop where they have the big machines that can actually print at a much higher speed and volume at a reduced cost.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Hammond?
That is correct.
Because that was a good reach.
These copiers have high-speed scanning capabilities on them. They'll scan the files, scan the documents. So that's an option that we don't have in the central office today. We have scanners scattered, but we don't have high-speed ones and copiers that are networked.
The other thing I would say, Mrs. Brightman, one of the reasons for moving to these network print solutions is because we're moving away from the smaller copiers where the cost per copy is significantly higher than the cost on one of the bigger machines. And that is right now causing a bit of angst among some of the secretaries who have desktop printers, desktop copiers. They will no longer have some of those, and there is that kind of internal debate going on about, where's my productivity, sitting at my desk running copies here, or walking down the hall to pick it up. And so we're having that conversation. But my sense is, given the volume of copies that you heard that we do, centralizing printing either on the floor or in the print shop are going to be to our advantage.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the consent agenda? If not, the question's on Mrs. Brightman's motion to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Is there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Next on the agenda is consideration of board member standing committee assignments. Distributed the recommended committee slate to all members this weekend. I'll go ahead and just read it into the record. Forgive me, I won't use Mr. and Mrs. I'll just read last names. So the policy committee would be chaired by Fisher with members Williams and Hardings. The Finance Committee chaired by Williams with members Bailey and Hardings. The Human Resources Committee chaired by Ridenauer with members Harshman and Brightman. The Curriculum and Instruction Committee chaired by Harshman with members Williams and Fisher. And the Facilities Committee chaired by Bailey with members Brightman and Ridenauer. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. President, I move to approve the standing committee slate and chairs as presented by board officers.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second, sir.
Second by Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion? I'll just say before we vote to approve, one thing I'd like to invite the committee chairs in the year coming up to do is if there is work that's coming out of your committee, whether it be budget adjustments from finance or the program of studies from curriculum, for example, or policies, I just invite the committee chairs to make the motion. If you make the motion to approve when things come to the full board, you have the right to speak first, and that would give you an opportunity to sort of explain to the board what the discussion was like in the committee, what any issues that were discussed, and I think it would help the full board understand the work within the committee and provide us some context when it's time for us to go ahead and vote. Of course, you don't have to, but I would just invite you to all consider that, and would help, I think, the public as well as all of us understand the roles that our committees play in the work that we do.
Can I just ask a question? It's been a year. Is this an item that we vote on? How about that? Okay. Like I said, it's been a year.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the slate of board committees? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next is personnel action. Ms. Francisco.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. As discussed in closed session, there are several personnel items for your review and approval.
Is there a motion on personnel actions?
Mr. President, I move for staff recommendations on personnel.
Mr. Bailey makes a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the personnel actions? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. That brings us to board member committee reports. I'm not sure that any committee except policy has met since our last meeting, so Mrs. Fisher.
Policy Committee met earlier today. First, we reviewed the regulations to policy IKD, to the regulations for IKD, and it was revised by adding a definition of a non-traditional high school. That definition had been provided by staff. We also reviewed policies IGDK, IGDL, IKF, and Mr. Ridenhour's amendment to IKC earlier today, all of which have been dealt with in this meeting already. So,
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Are there any other committee chairs who wish to report anything? If not, is there anything from MABE? Mrs. Brightman, I know you were the legislative committee. Do you have?
Yes,
Okay,
Mrs.
I'm
Williams
sorry.
and I attended a workshop on Friday at MABE on communications. It was an extremely interesting workshop and had a lot of really good information, which I will give you a copy of the book to look at if you would like to.
That sounds great.
Pick up on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Brightman, sure.
Legislative Committee met on Monday. That's yesterday, right? Gosh, 2 days in a row. 2015 is a escalator year for maintenance of effort, which means that they'll be calculating a state average of maintenance of effort, and if any counties are below a certain percentage below that average of maintenance of effort, they will have to increase their maintenance of effort up to a cap of 2.5%. Estimated state aid is basically flat at this point. Several maintenance of effort legislation right after the train have already been pre-filed. They're expecting additional waiver options, broadening the definition of what is considered a non-recurring cost item that can be given outside of maintenance of effort. There's some dispute between the existing compensatory aid for disadvantaged 4-year-olds being defunded if there is additional funding made available for the broader universal pre-K. And there is discussion that there is money embedded in the existing comp ed in local shares, so that's a debate. Student regs, student discipline regs were published on Friday. There were no changes in the wording, so we do have some conflicts still existing with the existing law. And at this point, MABE is recommending that all counties move ahead with writing their policies on student discipline and code of conduct. They expect some test of this in court. MABE is also looking at some possible actions still to be taken. And I think this board may be putting on their agenda further discussion of student discipline and code of conduct and whether we have any more action that we would like to take as a board. The main, and just briefly, I know it's been a long evening, but the main problem right now is the wording that the school system provides the excluded student with comparable educational services and appropriate behavioral support services to promote successful return to the student's regular academic program. So in other words, the perpetrator will be put back into the school and the victim will need to be moved to another school if it comes to that point. That totally goes against what we've been doing for years now. And it's a balance that we would like to see remedied in a different way. Briefly, just in case there's no more Common Core standards, Mr. Ridenour. They've been rebranded, and they're now called College and Career Readiness State Standards, so it's CCRSS. I'm just, true story, a duck by any other name, but revisited discussions on mental health services, and MABE will be developing an action plan to bring this issue to the forefront of school safety discussions. The College and Career Readiness Act, MSDE will be writing those transition course curriculums, and I know we voted on IKC tonight, and I will be sending some comments from MABE to the policy committee on IKC. I think there is going to be some new changes in that policy. I think it's going to come back as far as transition courses being credit-bearing, and the idea that it's not that we have to have 4 math classes. We actually have to have, the students have to take math every year. So if a student has 5 years to graduate, they have 5 years of math. If it takes 6 years to graduate, they have 6 years of math. And the standard is set on enrollment in the math class, not completion or passing the math class, which seems odd, but who am I? We're expecting over 40 pieces of legislation to address some portion of the education reform and the new CCRSS, PARC or evaluation. So it's going to be a very active year on the entire concept of the education reforms. And the key legislation is going to be one put in to waive the MSA requirements for this spring. So fun for all of us going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Next on the agenda is, are there any other committees that can report? Okay.
Mr. President, sure. Just very quickly, and it'll be coming out again later on in different mediums. The governor's task force, let me see how he has it. It's called a P20 task force on arts education in Maryland schools. The task force, whose mission is to make recommendations to the governor on student access to dance, music, theater, and visual arts. In an effort to put a report together for the governor, they are setting up a group of forums, regional forums. There will be one in Hagerstown. It will take place on Wednesday, January 15th, 2014, from 7 to 9 at the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts. The public is invited, my colleagues are invited, elected officials are invited to give their ideas and views on what they see as appropriate education in those fields and how it can fit in to what we're doing and where we're going. So just a heads up, it will come out publicly again after the first of the year.
Great, thank you. Next is future agenda items. As Mrs. Brightman mentioned, we're scheduled just a few minutes at our next meeting to talk about the state discipline regs again, mostly just as a check-in with the 7 of us to see if we want to send another letter to the state board or whether we're satisfied with what we've done to that point. I haven't had a chance to read through the new materials that have come out. I'm sure other members haven't either, but if everybody can be prepared for that discussion on January 7th, that'll still give us time before the deadline if we would like to take a further position beyond what we had before. We are still planning the discussion on the elementary literacy program, as well as a number of other academically based reports over the next couple of months. So all those will be forthcoming. I noticed that there are no board member comments on the agenda, but we should do board member comments anyway. Mrs. Harshman?
It was wishful thinking.
I would just like to say that I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable holiday and vacation, and see you next year.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, just Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Mrs. Bright?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Mrs. Fisher? Mr. Bailey?
Joy and blessings and safety.
Mr. Ridenhour?
Just a thank you to the 3 young people who were here. Amanda, it is very great to see you. And we expect big things from you guys, so whether you get a D or not really doesn't matter. Thank you for coming, and not only thank you for coming, but God bless you for staying.
They're overachievers, right?
That's right.
They have to be.
And I want to thank you as well for coming. Usually I say why I'm going to vote the way I do on an issue that's somewhat controversial like that. I think in all the paying attention to Robert's rules, I sort of forgot to. And I'm just, out of courtesy, particularly to Mr. Cross who came, and to my barber, to be honest, I'm just going to say a couple of words. My barber has been on me about adding the D for about 3 years now. And that's no joke. He found out I was on the board, and he said, you need to bring back the D. And as the couple of years went by, he had a daughter who really struggles in math, does okay in everything else. She wanted nothing more than to go to the technical high school and be in the cosmetology program. And I asked him, I got my hair cut yesterday, so I told him I was going to say this. She ended up graduating early and deciding to go to a private beauty school. And a lot of it was because of the struggles in math and not wanting to have to continue to take mathematics and struggle to get over that line of a 70. And he told me that's why he wants to bring back the D. It would have changed the way she finished her high school career. So that's not the only reason that I would support it, although if he keeps giving me good haircuts, maybe I'll listen to him more. The other is, I heard a lot of people talk to me, whether it's in church or just on the street or in the grocery store, saying many of the same arguments that Mr. Cross made. And I think that's how I started this discussion, inclined to think. As I talked to more and more of those people, I started to ask them, what kind of grades did you get in school? Everybody who told me we shouldn't add the D had GPAs in the 3.5, 4.5 range. And as I started to seek out other people whose children I knew struggled, I got a very different point of view. So when I combined those two things, that's why I decided to support the D. And just out of respect for the fact that you took your time to come, I wanted to be sure that you understand how I came to the conclusion that I did. I'll add everybody else's wishes for a merry and very safe Christmas. I hope everybody's able to take time with family and friends, recharge your batteries, be safe, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody in the new year.
Before you address a couple of things, we did hear from someone who attends the Ohio State University. Mr. Bailey, I also know that you're a sports fan, and our new student board member is 8-0 right now as a 170-pounder wrestling out of North High School. So if you get a chance over the holidays to see him in a tournament or some other action, you should check him out.
I'd like to hand him his trophy.
Yep, that would be cool.
That's a tall order, but he's going to wrestle for it. Let's go. All right.
I like
Nobody else?
wrestling. I love it.
There are no further comments. We'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.